The date is November 22nd, 1963. It's a crisp autumn day, and Dallas, Texas is bathed in sunshine and hope. The air crackles with anticipation as crowds gather along the streets, their faces beaming with excitement. For today, they will catch a glimpse of their beloved president, John Fitzgerald Kennedy. The sleek midnight blue Lincoln Continental glides through the streets, carrying the charismatic leader and his elegant wife, Jackie. President Kennedy, flashing his trademark smile, waves to the adoring throngs. At 46, he embodies the youthful vigor and optimism of a nation on the rise. For many, Kennedy represents the dawn of a new era. His presidency has ushered in a sense of renewal, a belief that America stands on the precipice of greatness. The Cold War tensions that gripped the nation in fear just a year ago during the Cuban Missile Crisis have eased. The space race is in full swing, with Kennedy's bold promise to land a man on the moon by decade's end capturing the imagination of millions. As the motorcade enters Dealey Plaza, the cheers of the crowd swell. Parents hoist children onto their shoulders for a better view. Office workers lean out of windows, waving flags. The President and First Lady smile and wave back, the very picture of American royalty. And then, in an instant, everything changes. The alien sound of gunfire echoes across the plaza. One shot, then another and another. The president slumps forward. Jackie Kennedy, her pink suit suddenly stained with blood, crawls onto the trunk of the car, reaching for a piece of her husband's skull. Screams pierce the air. People dive for cover, unsure where the shots are coming from. Secret Service agents leap into action, but it's too late. John F. Kennedy, 35th President of the United States, has been fatally wounded. As word spreads, a wave of disbelief and anguish sweeps across the nation. Strangers embrace on street corners, weeping openly. Schools and businesses close. The vibrant promise of the morning has given way to a long, dark night of the American soul. In the days that followed, a stunned nation grappled with a single haunting question. Why? Why would anyone want to kill John F. Kennedy? And who could be behind such a monstrous act? The official investigation would eventually conclude that a lone gunman, Lee Harvey Oswald, was responsible for the assassination. But for many, this explanation was far from satisfactory. How could one man, acting alone, have succeeded in killing the most heavily guarded person in the country? To understand the swirling theories that emerged in the wake of Kennedy's death, we must first understand the world in which he lived and led. The early 1960s were a time of intense global tension. The Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union had brought the world to the brink of nuclear annihilation. Some theorists pointed to the Soviet Union as a potential culprit. Kennedy and Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev had engaged in a dangerous game of brinksmanship during the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. Could Khrushchev have ordered Kennedy's assassination as retaliation for the humiliation he suffered when forced to remove Soviet missiles from Cuba? Proponents of this theory argue that the KGB, the Soviet Union's feared intelligence agency, had both the means and the motive to carry out such an operation. They point to Lee Harvey Oswald's time in the Soviet Union and his marriage to a Russian woman as evidence of potential Soviet involvement. Yet this theory has significant flaws. For one, Khrushchev and Kennedy had actually developed a cautious rapport following the missile crisis. Both leaders recognized the need to ease tensions to prevent a catastrophic war. The assassination of a US president would have also been an extraordinarily risky move for the Soviets, potentially leading to a direct military confrontation with the United States. If not the Soviets, then perhaps America's neighbor to the south, Cuba, played a role in Kennedy's death. The animosity between the United States and Fidel Castro's Cuba was no secret. The failed Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961, a CIA-backed attempt to overthrow Castro, had been a humiliating defeat for Kennedy early in his presidency. Castro, keenly aware that the US continued to plot against him, might have decided to strike first. Some theories suggest that Cuban intelligence agents either carried out the assassination themselves or recruited Lee Harvey Oswald to do it. This theory gained some credence from Oswald's pro-Castro leanings and his attempt to travel to Cuba just months before the assassination. However, like the Soviet theory, it suffers from practical problems. Cuba, a small island nation, would have been taking an enormous risk by assassinating the US president. essentially inviting a full-scale invasion. Moving from international intrigue to domestic conspiracy, another popular theory implicates organized crime in Kennedy's death. The American Mafia had initially supported Kennedy's election in 1960, allegedly helping to secure votes in key states. But once in office, Kennedy's administration, particularly his brother and Attorney General Robert Kennedy, launched an unprecedented crackdown on organized crime. Robert Kennedy's war on the Mafia represented an existential threat to their operations. Some theorists argue that the Mafia, feeling betrayed and backed into a corner, decided to eliminate the president. This theory points to the Mafia's well-established presence in Dallas and their connections to Jack Ruby, the man who killed Lee Harvey Oswald 2 days after Kennedy's assassination. Proponents argue that Ruby was ordered to silence Oswald before he could reveal the true conspiracy. Adding another layer to this theory is the alleged cooperation between the CIA and the Mafia in plots to assassinate Fidel Castro. Could this unholy alliance have turned its sights on Kennedy when he began to pursue détente with Cuba? While the Mafia certainly had motives and the capacity for violence, orchestrating the assassination of a US president would have been a massive escalation from their usual operations. Furthermore, such a high-profile murder would likely have brought even more heat on their activities. Perhaps the most controversial theories implicate elements within the US government itself, particularly the CIA. These theories suggest that Kennedy had made powerful enemies within the intelligence community and military-industrial complex. Kennedy's actions in office had alarmed hardliners within these institutions. His refusal to provide air support during the Bay of Pigs fiasco, his pursuit of a nuclear test ban treaty with the Soviet Union, and his alleged plans to withdraw from Vietnam all ran counter to the hawkish policies favored by many in the intelligence and military establishments. Proponents of this theory argue that elements within the CIA, possibly in conjunction with other interested parties, orchestrated Kennedy's assassination to prevent a softening of America's Cold War stance. They point to the agency's well-documented involvement in coups and assassinations in other countries as evidence of their capability to carry out such an operation. This theory often ties into broader critiques of the official Warren Commission investigation, suggesting a cover-up at the highest levels of government. Yet, like all conspiracy theories, it struggles with the challenge of keeping such a massive secret over decades, given the number of people who would have to be involved. Beyond motive, the assassination's logistics spawn intricate theories, most notably the multiple shooter hypothesis. This posits a coordinated operation involving strategically placed assailants. Central to this web of speculation is the enigmatic Umbrella Man, an individual inexplicably holding an open umbrella on that sunny Dallas day. This incongruous figure has become a cipher for conspiracy theorists, who variously interpret his presence as a signal to hidden shooters or even as a disguised weapon operator. While these conspiracy theories continue to captivate the public imagination, we must also consider the official conclusion that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. This brings us to perhaps the most unsettling possibility of all, that a single deranged individual could change the course of history. Oswald's life was marked by instability and a search for significance. A troubled childhood, a stint in the Marines marked by disciplinary issues, his defection to and return from the Soviet Union, all paint a picture of a man struggling to find his place in the world. Psychologists who have studied assassins note common traits: a tendency towards grandiose thinking, a desire for notoriety, and a belief that their actions will bring about significant change. In this light, Oswald fits the profile of other lone assassins throughout history. It's worth noting that most presidential assassinations and attempts in US history have been carried out by lone individuals rather than vast conspiracies. From John Wilkes Booth to Leon Czolgosz to John Hinckley Jr., the annals of history are filled with disturbed individuals who sought to make their mark through violence. The idea that Oswald acted alone is, in many ways, more terrifying than any conspiracy. It suggests a randomness, a vulnerability in our society that no amount of security or foresight can fully protect against. In the end, the true motives behind John F. Kennedy's assassination may never be known with absolute certainty. The passage of time, the deaths of key witnesses, and the sheer volume of conflicting information make a definitive answer elusive. What is certain is the profound impact this event had on the American psyche. The loss of Kennedy marked the end of an era of optimism and the beginning of a period of disillusionment and cynicism. The youth and vigor that Kennedy brought to the presidency gave way to a darker, more uncertain future. In the years that followed, America would be rocked by further assassinations, an unpopular war in Vietnam, and domestic unrest. The bright promise of Camelot had degraded into a nation grappling with its own identity and place in the world. As we continue to contend with the legacy of November 22, 1963, we are reminded that history is not just a sequence of events, but a complex tapestry of human ambitions, fears, and choices. The assassination of John F. Kennedy remains a tragic testament to the fragility of life and the unpredictable nature of history. Regardless of who pulled the trigger or why, the loss of Kennedy robbed America of a leader who, for all his flaws, embodied the hopes and aspirations of a generation. A president who challenged America to reach for the stars. His death marked not just the end of a presidency, but the end of an era, a moment when America's innocence was shattered and the complexities of the modern world came crashing into view. May he rest in eternal peace.